Hi, ma'am. Good morning. Tell me your name.
Oh, Jessica Harms.
That was Jessica Harms appearing in court. She's accused of torturing the 5-year-old daughter of her boyfriend by locking the refrigerator and withholding food. The boyfriend, Dan Fivas, faces the same charge, and detectives say the little girl was so hungry she was actually eating Play-Doh and her own feces to survive. I go through the horrific case. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. There's a reason that Morgan & Morgan is the country's largest personal injury law firm. It's because the firm wins a lot. Morgan & Morgan has more than 1,000 lawyers who've recovered $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the last few months, a client in Florida got $12 million when the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That was 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it really easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're ever injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/crimefix. Click that link below or scan the QR code that you see right there on your screen. This case is so disturbing, and the details that I'm going to share with you are really awful, so I want you to be prepared for that. Jessica Harms and her live-in boyfriend, Dan Fivas, they each face a felony charge of child torture involving Fivas's 5-year-old daughter, who police say was starving and can't talk. She's 5, and the police say she doesn't talk. Can you imagine that? She's not in school. The case takes us to West Valley, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City. The population's around 140,000. The investigation started back on August 30th when a West Valley police detective said Dan Fivas took his 5-year-old daughter to the hospital and told doctors that she was not gaining weight and she would eat her own feces. The Center for Safe and Healthy Families at Primary Children's Medical Center, or SHF, administered care for the girl, noting severe malnutrition and growth failure. Fivas reported to hospital staff that he received custody of the girl when she was approximately 15 months old, and she has steadily decreased on the growth chart. Medical records reviewed by SHF showed that on or about March 1st, 2024, Fivas reported that the girl will eat until she vomits and has abdominal distension, eats non-food items like Play-Doh and fecal matter. She eats food out of the trash, gets up at night to find food, and suffers from chronic constipation. The girl had 2 admissions for failure to thrive, including her current hospital stay. Now, all of what I just read to you came from a probable cause affidavit. This girl was very, very sick, according to that probable cause statement submitted to the court, asking that Fivas and his live-in girlfriend, Jessica Harms, be held without bail. The girl was 5 years old, but detectives said she only weighed as much as a 16-month-old child. Her heart rate was incredibly low, which is apparently a life-threatening sign of malnutrition. A detective wrote that the 5-year-old was hospitalized for 16 days and gained 8.8 pounds in that time while being fed regular meals. Detectives interviewed Jessica Harms' 13-year-old son, and police say the boy told them that he was forced to sleep in a hammock chair to keep an eye on the little girl, who would sleep on the floor with a sheet. Police said the boy told them that it was his mother's idea to place locks on the refrigerator, the pantry, and the trash to keep the girl from, quote, stealing food. The detectives said they also interviewed Jessica Harms and Dan Fivas. The detective said that Harms told them that when she and Fivas moved in together, she noticed the little girl would eat large quantities of food, so she was hesitant to give her more food, and the girl would bulk up and then lose weight and get skinnier. And she also knew that the girl was not talking. The detectives wrote, Harms stated that when the girl started, quote, stealing stuff in the middle of the night, Fivas resented her and thought she was a thief and didn't treat her good. Harms described that the girl would eat whatever she could find, including wax melts, frozen carrots, and moldy bread she found in the garbage can. Harms stated that the girl ate the same amount of food as her 13-year-old son, but was unable to explain why the boy wasn't starving, but the girl was. The detectives also interviewed Dan Fivas, who they said also told them his daughter was stealing food. The detectives wrote, Fivas admitted he tried to give up custody of the girl, because she rubbed him the wrong way, and he got an odd vibe or odd feeling from her that was not in any way, shape, or form kosher for him. Fivas also reported that he resented the girl. Everything that the detectives and SHF were seeing were clearly signs of serious neglect. The detectives wrote, SHF also noted that the girl experienced physical neglect and psychological maltreatment. SHF learned that the girl slept on the floor with a sheet while the rest of the family slept on air mattresses or beds, which raised concerns for spurning, a form of psychological maltreatment. Additionally, the girl was not enrolled in school, which raised concerns for isolation, another form of psychological maltreatment. SHF reported that a child of the girl's age is still dependent on caregivers to provide food, shelter, clothing, safety, nurturing, and medical care. However, they are at an age that they can attempt to, quote, save themselves from things like starvation by scavenging food or eating non-food items. SHF noted that a common late-stage manifestation of starvation is the ability to overcome revulsion and eat non-food in an attempt to sustain themselves, and that eating feces is likely due to starvation. Now, all of this information led detectives to believe that the girl was being tortured by the adults who should have been caring for her. The detectives wrote, SHF concluded that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, the girl's condition and findings were consistent with child physical neglect and child torture through food deprivation. The affidavit continued, SHF reported that child torture is a medical diagnosis that may include components of severe physical abuse, restraint, unusual disciplinary practices, starvation, and severe psychological abuse, including isolation, spurning, verbal abuse, and terrorizing. And that is precisely how this victim was treated. She wasn't allowed food despite smelling and watching her family members eat. She ate her own feces. She didn't have a bed. She wasn't enrolled in school. She couldn't even talk. She was isolated from everything. Jessica Harms appeared in court briefly, where she was ordered held without bail. Take a look.
Hi, ma'am. Good morning. Tell me your name.
Oh, Jessica Harms.
Ms. Harms, good morning to you. Let's see, this is case 251913805. Ma'am, I have appointed an attorney to represent you on this case from the Salt Lake Legal Defenders. Ma'am, it's very important that you keep in contact with your lawyer while this case is pending. Let's see, Ms. Harms, in addition to the charge that you're facing, the state is requesting a protective order. The protected party in this case is, ma'am, do you know that person?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, I will sign this order today. You're not to have any contact with her while this case is pending. No in-person, no telephonic, no electronic contact. You may not go where she lives or goes to school. You may not have anyone else contact her for you, and you may not possess a weapon or ammunition. Ms. Harms, do you understand everything I just told you?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, I'll sign this order now. A copy will be served upon you at the jail.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Harms, you are being held without bail, and that means I will set this matter for a detention hearing so that your judge can determine whether or not you can be safely released. That hearing will take place next week, November 13th at 8:30 in the morning with Judge Daines. So Ms. Harms, on Monday afternoon, I want you to call the legal defenders. They can tell you the name of the lawyer who's been assigned to your case, and that way they can be prepared to go forward at that hearing, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, ma'am. Take care of yourself. You're good to step back now.
So to discuss this case, which is absolutely horrific, I want to bring in Mark Weaver. He is a prosecutor based in Ohio, and he has prosecuted many, many cases, horrific cases himself, and also works as a judge sometimes. Mark, this little girl, the detectives in Utah said they say she is 5 years old, and she basically has been tortured her entire life for the last 2 to 3 years. Much of her life, this little girl has been tortured. She's been eating her own feces, Play-Doh, trying to steal. It always kills me. I've seen other cases like this where a child is described as stealing food. Kids can't steal food.
It's very upsetting. First of all, good on Utah for having a first-degree felony called child torture. Many states don't have that crime. They have endangering children, felonious assault, aggravated child abuse. But I'm glad there's a serious charge. In this case, it's 10 years to life. the minimum of 10 years. Of course, you can bring a charge for every new event, right? So it's not just one charge. You could bring multiple charges for every day or every new instance of torture. And I hope the prosecutors will. As you mentioned, I have worked on a lot of cases, heartbreaking cases involving children. This one really, really stuck out. And here's my rule of thumb. If you are locking the trash or the refrigerator so children can't get in, that's a dead giveaway that Children's Welfare Agency needs to be in there finding out why. In rare occasions with an eating disorder, perhaps you need to keep certain food away from children, but that's so rare as to probably need to be medically supervised. The notion that you're locking your refrigerator is the red flag that something has gone wrong here.
Something is very, very wrong if you're putting locks on the refrigerator. And according to the probable cause statement, the 13-year-old son of Jessica Harms, and it sounds like from what this boy has told investigators, he was tasked with like watching over this poor child. And Jessica Harms in these documents, she's not the biological mother of this 5-year-old girl. So she sounds like evil stepmom here. It was her idea, according to her biological son, the 13-year-old boy who was tasked with sleeping in a hammock chair, to watch over the little girl who would sleep on the floor, sick. It was her idea to put locks on the trash and on the fridge to keep the little girl from stealing food. I don't understand, Mark. Have you seen this in other cases where, and I have, but where do they come up with this idea that the child is stealing food? Because if you live in the house and you're a member of the household and you are hungry, you should be able to go into the fridge or the pantry and get food, or ask for food and get food.
At the core of this appears to be a dislike for this child compared to the other child. Apparently, this couple had another baby together. This child came with the mother. The 13-year-old boy came with the father. I grew up in a single mother home, and so there's lots of different family situations out there. I respect that, but in this case, it's clear that this family had some issue with this child. Perhaps she had a discipline problem. She doesn't even speak at age 5. She must have been difficult to raise. But that's what we are called as parents to do. You raise your children no matter how difficult they are. And the first part of raising children is keeping them safe. And that's where these two people seem to have failed. And that's where they should be held accountable.
I want to walk back just a little bit here, because it sounds like, Jessica, the mother figure here, and I use that figure very loosely, that term mother figure very loosely here. She's got this 13-year-old son. She and this Fivas guy, Dan Fivas, they get together. He somehow has this 5-year-old child that he doesn't even want. He's got the 5-year-old girl. He somehow brings this child into the relationship. And then they have this baby. And Dan Fivas tells the cops, according to this probable cause statement, that he went to Children's Services after they figured out that he and Jessica were pregnant, and she was going to have an actual baby that they shared together. And he said, he was like, I don't want this child, take her. And they wouldn't take the child. Do you believe that? Is that even possible, that you would go to Children's Services and say, I don't want to take care of this child. I can't take care of this child. And that there wouldn't be some type of way to get foster parenting or something like that?
It's perhaps my prosecutor's bias, but I tend to not believe things defendants say. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm cynical. Maybe I'm doing this too long. I do know this. Most people in child welfare agencies care about children. Sometimes they're overscheduled and they have too many files in their caseload. But a parent, let's assume for a second it's true. A parent who comes to the authorities and says, I can't or don't want to raise this child, should leap that case to the very top of the caseworker's caseload. And that means either pulling that child out or finding the mother of the child. In my research, I couldn't figure out where the mother is, whether the mother is even alive, but finding another place for this child, whether it's a foster home or whether it's a well-run and safe group environment. We all remember orphanages from movies like Little Orphan Annie and other places like that. It's possible to have a well-run and safe group environment where a child's needs will be taken care of. Whatever it is, you would think that had someone said, I can't or won't raise my 4-year-old or 5-year-old, whatever this allegedly happened, that it would leap to the top of the caseload of the caseworker. My guess is this man did not say that, and it didn't happen the way he described.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of issues with children's services agencies in every state. I mean, they're overworked, overwhelmed. But if somebody really went in and said, I don't want this child, I can't raise this child, I mean, something you would think happen, and something would take place. The facts here as being alleged in this probable cause statement are so disturbing, Mark. This little girl was 5 years old. She is 5 years old. And when she was admitted to the hospital on August 30th, the detectives say she weighed the same as an approximate 16-month-old child. I mean, that is so insane. And it almost sounds like this child, had the child not been taken to the hospital when she could have died very soon. I mean, the human body is very resilient, and especially kids are very resilient, but this child was in bad shape.
Yeah, the official motto of my state, Ohio, is with God, all things are possible. So I pray that this child can go on to have a meaningful life as she grows up. But we have to acknowledge that the growth that a child makes between when they're a baby and when they're, say, 6, 7, 8, that is such an important time of growth, both for them physically and mentally, that this child has had that period so significantly stunted and affected. It's hard to imagine that her physical growth will be typical. Certainly that if she's not talking at age 5, or that her mental development will be typical as well. So I'd like to think with a loving home, this child can go on to live a important and meaningful life. But having said that, these two people appear to have made that very difficult for the child.
And I want to go back to locking the refrigerator. It wasn't just the 13-year-old who said, yes, they did this. I mean, the 13-year-old told the detectives this, but then, according to what the detectives wrote, they interviewed both Dan Fivas and Jessica Harms, and they both admitted to doing these things, according to what the detective said. They attempted to give her away after Jessica Harms became pregnant with their child, and they admitted to locking the refrigerator, the freezer, the pantry, and even their bedroom door. Despite their story that they fed the victim monstrous amounts of food, the victim's medical status shows otherwise. So it sounds like they tried to say, according to the detectives, that oh my God, we were feeding her. But they're saying, yeah, we locked the door, or the pantry door. We locked the fridge. This little girl is eating wax. She's eating Play-Doh. She's locking herself to try to save herself, like locking herself in the bathroom and using the bathroom and then eating her own feces. Have you ever seen a case or had to handle a case like this, Mark, in your experience?
I've seen a lot of children being mistreated, nothing to this level. The facts also suggest that they were locking the trash. That does away with any notion that we were giving her plenty of food. Why is the child going in the trash? You mentioned the horrific fact that she's eating her own feces. There's some indication in the evidence that this child refused to use the toilet and stayed in a diaper so she would have access to her own feces as a food source. You don't have to be a parent to be mortified by this, but certainly those of us who have raised children, it breaks our heart in a different way. Utah prosecutors need to come at this couple hard, and they need to make a very high profile out of this case, because in the one case, we want justice for this child and punishment for these two people. In the other case, we need every parent to know that this sort of mistreatment of children will land you in prison for the rest of your life.
You said that there can be a torture count for each act. So this is just the initial arrest document. Do you think maybe this goes to grand jury and additional charges with additional investigation are added?
That's how I would prosecute it. Sometimes we will bring a charge just to get the defendants in custody. And then we do what's called a superseding indictment, which is another indictment adding additional charges. Under criminal law, each separate act can have its own charge. Now, if I'm in the middle of beating up somebody, for example, in an assault case, you can't charge a defendant for every punch that the defendant makes. But every time this family went to bed and then the next day got up and put another lock on the refrigerator or opened it again, I would argue is a separate charge. Each day that they decided to do this, where they all night long they could have thought better of it, stop and reflect on what they're doing. Every time they did it again, certainly you think they're able to get a dozen more charges, all felonies of the first degree, all of which have 10-year minimum prison sentences. And the right judge will stack those charges, and these people would never get out of prison.
You know, the 13-year-old, we don't know how well he was treated. Obviously, it doesn't sound like there are any charges filed with regard to him, but he obviously, it sounds like he was wanted by his mother. But if you're going to do this to a child you don't want, a child you do care about and you do want, I'm assuming maybe there is some mistreatment potentially there. Do you think that they'll be looking at that too? I mean, you have a 13-year-old sleeping in a chair to keep watch over a 5-year-old girl that you don't want.
Yeah, whether or not there's individual abuse against this 13-year-old, simply asking your 13-year-old to be part of your criminal behavior of torture of another child is its own crime, right? So enlisting your 13-year-old into your crimes is its own crime of either endangering children or encouraging the delinquency of children. Those are lesser offenses. If, a prosecutor may add those to the indictment to give the jury sort of a menu of options when they go back for deliberation. If it were me, I'd be trying to find as many instances of child torture as I can for each of them, separate apart from each other, lay them out there, and the defense lawyers will be begging for a deal that lets these people out in 25 years.
Wow. Well, it's horrific. And there's a baby involved here too. A little baby. We don't know the exact age of the baby, but just an awful case. These people are innocent until proven guilty, but what is written in these documents is absolutely horrific. And I hope that this little girl can recover, learn how to talk, go to school. But she is way behind in life already. Mark Weaver, thank you so much.
Yes, we should be praying for this child, and thanks to Law&Crime for bringing light to this very sad case.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And Jessica Harms, she will be back in court later this week. Dan Fivas, we're still working to learn his next court date. That's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.